Welcome everybody, and thanks for taking the time to join us today for this webinar on You Have an NDIS Plan, Now What? And that's around self-advocacy with an NDIS plan. My name's Liz Wilkinson and I'm a project manager with the Mental Health Coordinating Council of New South Wales. Before we begin, I'd like to first start by taking a moment for each of us to acknowledge the custodians of the lands on which we're joining from today. And where I am on quite cold country today, so I'm a bit shivery, in Gadigal land and the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Gadigal people, and I'd like to recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. Next, a quick note on housekeeping, that for today's webinar, you really can just sit back and watch and listen. But if you'd like to interact with us, you can ask a question. You just go down to the bottom of your screen and click on the Q&A box and then submit your questions through there. And we'll try and get to those all today. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Mental Health Coordinating Council, and we're doing it in partnership with the Multicultural Disability Advocacy Association. And we've also got guest speakers today from family advocacy, sharing from lived experience, and also from Mental Health Carers New South Wales. I'll also take a moment to note that this webinar is brought to you as part of the Reimagine.today project, and that's our project around the website Reimagine Today, which is a support resource for people living with mental health conditions and their carers and other supports, to support them with the process of accessing and starting planning with the NDIS. One of the things that we've been doing as part of that project is developing new resources to support people with skill building around skills that are important for the NDIS journey. And so self-advocacy is one of the skills that's been identified by and for people living with mental health conditions as really important for the NDIS journey, and it continues to come up. And so that's why we've put together this webinar, and it's a webinar series actually. So as we continue it, I'd also like to acknowledge people joining us and all around Australia with lived experience of mental health distress and their carers and family. And I'd like to acknowledge the important role that we each play in the reform of the mental health system. And I'd encourage you to continue fighting, and thank you for your contributions. So what are we going to talk about today? As I mentioned, this is part of a webinar series. We already ran a webinar on self-advocacy when you're applying for the NDIS. So if you'd like the video of that webinar, then please let me know and I can send it to you. But today we're going to jump right into self-advocacy with an NDIS plan. So why is it important? What are some of the challenges you might face with the NDIS or with LACs, that's local area coordinators, planners and providers. We're going to look at some personal experiences of NDIS planning and management and advice for self-advocacy in some of those circumstances, practical solution steps and tips for self-advocacy, and advice when supporting someone else with an NDIS plan and advocacy. So that's it from me. We're going to jump next into welcoming Nina Levite, who is a capacity building and support officer with the Multicultural Disability Advocacy Association. And Nina's going to be doing most of the talking today and sharing with us from her wealth of practical experience in advocacy, and particularly with supporting people with self-advocacy in the NDIS space. And I think Nina's going to be joining us any moment, hopefully. There you are. Welcome, Nina, and thanks very much.
Hi there. Thanks, Liz, for the great intro. Yeah, so I'm just going to be doing, I'd just like to welcome acknowledgement to the custodians of the lands on where I am at the moment, which is the Yuin people, and like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, and recognise their continuing connection to the land. So I'm in Bega Valley, for those that don't know where I am. So we did first session and we talked about self-advocacy, and I'm just sort of recapping on that. It's not as in much detail, but today's topic is once you've got the NDIS. So we're just sort of relating it to that. I'll just So advocacy, what does it mean? To promote, protect and secure a person's rights. Next. Okay, so this is tips for how to self-advocate. Be clear about what you want. So think about, it's a good idea to write things down and work out what it is, because sometimes we think we have a clear intention of what we need and what we require and what we want to advocate for ourselves, but then sometimes there's more to it than just one thing. And by writing it down helps you identify what is the priority of the issue that you're having, or it can be anything. It can be just like making a phone call, and it's like, well, or the intent is just to stop an account, start an account, get a message across about details to the service provider. So when self-advocating, it doesn't mean it's a huge issue. It can be, like I just said, just ringing someone up and getting your voice heard and what your needs met through that call. So you speak to someone you trust about your wants and goals. So if you have somebody that you can talk to, it's good to just, like I said, write it down, talk to them about it, and then you've got clear intention and work out a plan of how you're going to go about that. And if you need a support person or somebody to advocate with you, find out about your rights. That's really important, because you want to empower yourself. So you want to find out what your rights are in all walks of life, like every aspect of your life, and you'll find that you have got rights. And once you know that, then when you approach a situation and you want to self-advocate, because you know your rights, that have that power in your hands to sort of remind the people that you're speaking to about the issue you have about your rights. And that actually goes a long way, because people will listen to you once you explain, well, these are my rights, and under this, your service or fair trading or whatever, that what your rights are. And then they think, oh, okay. And if you can't work out, like, navigate how to find your rights, advocacy services, support persons, family members, there's a lot of information on different websites that you can find out about your rights. Like I said earlier, make a plan about how you're going to achieve those goals, whether it's in writing, talking to someone, a face-to-face meeting, filling out a complaint form. That's the way to do it, is make a plan. Be informed, research, ask questions, find out about what services you need to help you achieve those goals. And this is great when you have other people with shared lived experience. You can ask them, because from their experiences you will then know how to navigate, how to be informed, and to seek out the right support and services. Speak up when you feel you're being treated unfairly. Now, sometimes that's easier said than done. So it's always about feeling safe in a safe space. So if you have people that you can ask to be with you when you want to say something that you're feeling, some people feeling a bit intimidated or just not sure if they've got the right words or the message is going to be conveyed so the person understands them. So always ask for support. You're always entitled, wherever you go, whatever you do in life, to have a support person with you. And that doesn't have to be a formal support. It can be a family or friend. So make sure you take advantage of asking somebody to be with you when you're feeling like that you just don't feel confident enough. Keep a record of your communications and agreements with service providers. That's really important, because I'm sure they're keeping a record of it. And so then if things go a bit pear-shaped, you have your version of, you know, communications times and agreements with service providers. So then you have something to come back to if you need to provide that evidence. And also it keeps you on track of where you're up to. Join with others to help you build the skills you need to self-advocate. And there are advocacy groups out there, community groups. School courses, connect with advocacy organisations. EMDA has a lot of side projects. We've got an active citizens project. We have a small stones project, and they're all projects where people can come in and form a group and then start to identify issues and needs within their community, and then they can work out a plan on how to get those messages out there to the community and their local MPs to get their needs met. So that's a great way to build your skills. Next. Then we talked about rights before. So everybody has the right to be treated equally, be safe from violence and abuse, have a home that is adequate for our needs, be part of a family or to start our own, privacy, to have our private space and our information to be kept confidential, live independently in the community, work in a job we choose to earn a decent living, an education equal to everyone in the community, the best possible health care, access public spaces and public services, vote and have a say in laws and policies that affect us, participate in arts, sports and leisure. Disability service standards. Can't express this like it's a really valuable thing to know, and a lot of people that I ask actually don't even know that there are these standards. So it's set in legislations, and every service provider or someone providing disability service has to abide by these standards. So what are they? Be treated fairly when using a disability service, participating the community and feel included when using disability services, have a service that supports them in making their own choices and works with them towards their goals. That's a really important one. You know, often people will find they're in a service and then the service is making all the decisions for them based on what they think their needs are and what they want. And that is something they're not supposed to be doing. And this is where self-advocacy comes in big time, because that's where you need your voice to say, hey, that's not reflecting my goals or choices, and you need to be heard at that stage, and let people know that they're making the wrong decisions for you, or they shouldn't. Well, actually, they shouldn't be making any decisions for you. They are there to support you and help you achieve those goals. Give feedback and complaints about a service. So any service that doesn't provide their feedback and complaints procedures, they might have one. You need to still ask, if I want to, how do I do it? Who's the person I go to? What's their role and what's their contact details? Every service must have some form of feedback and complaint procedure. Access the services they need. So that's about, you know, doing the research, finding out about those services, what they can provide, and not every service can provide what you need. So then it's about accessing those other services, but you have the right to have a service that is well managed. Now that's very important, because if a service isn't well managed, then there's a lot of holes in it, and where, you know, things like feedback and complaints, who's going to respond to that, how they're going to manage that, and what time frame have they got around that. So if it's well managed, you'll probably find they will just have a feedback and complaints form that they can give to you when you engage in the service. That's just one example. Exercising our rights. If there are changes you want to make in your life and you need to access services to do this, you can speak up and ask to access these services. If you're unhappy about a service and feel that your rights are not being respected, you can tell the service and let them know what kind of changes you want to happen. Now, for an example with this one, I often come across people that have got children, adult children, and if you rewind pre-NDIS and pre any type of funding, and people were in group homes or different services that were like, I can't explain it, but sorry, I'm not explaining it very well, that it was just part of the culture where you didn't say anything, you didn't make complaints. So things are changing because we have laws around people's rights. So never feel like if you've got a problem that you can't talk to the service provider, because without actually speaking up, nothing does change. And the other part to that is they will never know that there's any issues going on for you. So it's really important, and that you feel safe and supported when you do so. So therefore asking who the person is that you go and speak to, that you're with someone, if you can have a support person with you at the time. You might want to write a letter, make a phone call. It's really important, and it's important for the service as well as yourself to make changes. Services are not allowed to make you feel bad or stop you giving you support just because you made a complaint, and that's what I was just referring to. Responsibilities. With rights come certain responsibilities. So while speaking up for ourselves, it's important that we also respect the rights of other people, take care in making decisions, take responsibility for our actions and the decisions we make. So, I mean, there are a lot of advocacy associations around. With EMDA, it's individual advocates that we have, which we've got another title, capacity building support officers. And what we do is we support a person to sort out problems themselves. So we just sit down, have a conversation, they tell us what the issue is, and then from that we might find there's an array of things that are connected to that issue. And in that discussion, that assists them to sort out what they need to advocate for themselves and to resolve the issue that they have at the time. Support them to raise concerns with services. So in this way, we can write letters, attend meetings with a person, or negotiate with agencies, but always with the person. We don't just go in and just take over and just go, okay, we'll do it all for you. It's always beside the person, supporting the person to have their voice. Another thing is completing applications, and we make referrals to agencies with expertise skills. And I'm aware of the time because I've raced through that. So is there any questions? There's no questions in the chat. So in my second part, I'll be focusing more about NDIS participants. So I'll just cover on that now. So in the last session, it was how do you get the NDIS? So in this session, it was as an NDIS participant. So what I've just spoken about just then, that applies to any person with or without NDIS that's living with a disability. And it also, family and friends and carers, they can assist people self-advocating and using those tips there. So with the NDIS comes, now we're into the fourth year. I think it was 2016 it rolled out. And it's changing all the time. So the NDIS website, although it has the information on there, if you've got questions, sometimes they're not always answered. So it's a bit about doing more research. And like I mentioned before, it's about finding out what your rights are. And with the NDIS constantly changing, then it's I suppose in a way your responsibility to find out what those changes are, or have somebody support you to do so. And so when it comes to being on the NDIS, as I mentioned before, consumer rights and the disability standards, they're really, really important, because everybody that you engage with through the NDIS as a participant, from the NDIS, the NDIA and service providers, they all have a responsibility to comply to the standards. I'm going to give a list. If people want a list of all the information that I'll be talking about today, that's available. Liz can send that by request after the session. And I've run out of, that's all I had for the first session. So I'm just going to hand it back over to Liz. And like I said, I think we're a bit ahead of time. And is there a question there? I was just going to see.
No, that's perfect. Thanks very much, Nina.
Okay, sorry about that.
Covered today. Nothing to apologise for. Really, really comprehensive, interesting information there. And thank you so much for sharing. So next up, we've got Annalise, who's going to be sharing some of her lived experience of having an NDIS plan and self-advocating in that space. Thanks very much, Annalise, and welcome.
Hi, thanks, Liz. My name's Annalise Constable. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am today, and that's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So my name is Annalise Constable, and I struggle with mental health issues, and I'd like to share with you my journey of being on the NDIS for a psychosocial disability and my experience of self-advocacy. So the first question I'm going to answer is, what's your story of having an NDIS plan? So I worked for about a year preparing my NDIS application with a local mental health organisation, specifically one staff member, Zara, who guided me through the process. And when I received news that my application was successful, I felt a massive sense of relief and validation. Relief because I would have access to services and support that I need and want to live the life that I want. And validation because my disability is invisible and it's very frequently dismissed. So it was very validating. From having my application successful, I needed to work with Zara at my local mental health organisation to understand how the NDIS funding could be applied to my life and how it could help me. And the local mental health organisation was my plan coordinator, and they could help me set up service agreements, which are like contracts with any of the people or organisations I employed to support me. And as plan coordinators, they could also guide me in my budget management. In general, my overarching way of approaching the NDIS in any way, so whether that's my plan coordinator or my LAC, or when the NDIA gets in contact with me, my overarching way of engaging with the NDIS is knowing that out of everyone, I know myself best. I know what I struggle with, I know what I excel at, and I know what I need help with. And I'm the only person who knows my entire experience, and this gives me confidence to go in as the expert on myself and my life and my disability and what I need and want. So I'm going to give you some examples of how I have self-advocated within the NDIS once I was successful in my application. So when I found out that my application was successful and I had been accepted for the NDIS, I thought that my time applying for NDIS funding was done. But this isn't the case. So I've been allocated a pool of funding and it has been split into certain budgets. And if I want something, for instance, meal preparation and support to be covered financially by the NDIS, I now have to apply for that within the NDIS. So for this meal support, I will need to engage an expensive OT, occupational therapist, to do an assessment, and they will write a report and make a recommendation for meal preparation and support. So each time I ask for something to be funded by the NDIS, I'm asked to justify and advocate for myself as to why I need this funding. And when, say, that occupational therapist comes and talks to me about what my needs are, I have to advocate for myself and express to them what I struggle with, what I need help with, and what I would like to receive in terms of help. So there's some examples. One time I went in for my yearly NDIS review with the LAC, and I I had to advocate for my current services to remain and sometimes to ask for more. And so to do this, I thoroughly prepared before the review and made sure that I knew my goals and how I wanted to reach them. And when I've gone into these reviews, I've taken my support worker and we've discussed before we've gone in for the review what I want to come out of the review and what role I want them to have in the review, and how I see myself existing in that space and how we're going to interact and manage that engagement. So I did once take a support worker into a review, and in that review, the support worker began advocating for something that we hadn't discussed together. And this support worker began advocating for more support hours as they needed more income. And this experience for me was really disheartening and disempowering. And I was angry and upset as I felt I was being taken advantage of and that my support person was acting in their own interest when their role in the review was to act in my interest and to support me to self-advocate. So soon after this experience, I let the support worker go. I explained to them what had happened and how it had made me feel. And there are a couple of other issues happening there as well. But yeah, I let them go. And so in this process, I learned that it's best to have more than one support worker. So if one is sick or away, or something happens like what I just explained, I'm not left with no support. So after this, I employed 2 new support workers based on their strengths of administration, advocacy, and disability rights. So I knew that we'd be on the same page. So I've now had 5 support coordinators with my local mental health organisation, and each of those people have had varying levels of experience and capacity and ability. And soon after employing my 2 new support workers, it became evident that my support coordinator from the local mental health organisation, who coordinated my NDIS plan, had made quite a massive budgeting error. And the support coordinator no longer worked for the mental health organisation, I imagine because of issues such as that happening with a few people. So I needed to meet with other staff from the mental health organisation who were now coordinating my plan. So before I went into that meeting, my new support worker and I prepared a lot so that we could hold the organisation accountable for any errors on their part, and to find a way forward where I wasn't going to be at any disadvantage or deficit due to the mistake of my plan coordinator. I was prepared to leave this local mental health organisation because of this error. I really needed to know that I was going to be treated with respect and that my concerns were going to be taken seriously. I asked for an apology for the mistakes and the unnecessary distress that the budgeting error had caused me. And the organisation did take responsibility for those errors and apologised. And we worked together to find a way forward, and I still am with that organisation now. Some tips or advice that I have for others who have the NDIS. So as a person with a disability, you're the expert in your life and experience, and your voice is the most important voice in the conversation. I just want to encourage and remind you not to forget that. It can be hard to remember that when the voices of people with disability are often not listened to or disregarded. I would also recommend self-care. A lot of self-care, so looking after yourself. So I know that when I have to go into bat to advocate for myself, I need to have a confidence in myself, and I need to be feeling strong, or at least, acting as if I am feeling strong and confident in that time. And so knowing that I'm going in and I've slept well, I've been eating well, I'm exercising, I'm finding healthy ways to express how I'm feeling, are really helpful ways for me to engage when I'm doing self-advocacy with the NDIS. I always try to follow up anything related to the NDIS with something that gives me life. So whether that's walking my dog or going to the beach or having a nap or talking to someone that I trust. So I'm going to go to the beach after this today. I find finding someone or an organization to help me, support me through the process and explain the process in language, because when there is always new processes when you're applying for things or getting an OT assessment. I would recommend that when you are applying for the NDIS, or when you are justifying your need for a support or a service, that you look at your health and your disability on a worst day scenario. So when you're asked what the functional impact of your disability is, I've always painted a clear picture of what my worst day looks like, so that the NDIS has a clear idea of where I am and how I am when I need the most help and support. I think one of the most important things that I've realized since being on the NDIS is sometimes they can catch you off guard and you can be unprepared. So I might be in the supermarket and I might receive a phone call and it's the NDIA and they're asking me questions about my plan. I need to remind myself that I don't need to be afraid to say that I can't speak now, that I want someone to support me, that I want to know, what is this call about? Who is it that's calling? What do you need from me? And I can get back to you, so that I don't respond without preparing and kind of off the cuff. So just knowing that I can pause and say, I will get to this, like we can have this conversation, but now's not a good time for me. And I think a big part of that is working on like my communication style and trying to be assertive, not being rude or reactive, and not being passive, but being like, no, actually I do have rights in this situation, and I'm going to say this isn't a good time for me. And so I like to prepare and plan as much as I can, because that's what gives me confidence when I'm engaging with the NDIA. And in saying that, I see there's some questions in the box and they will get answered, and I'll have a look at them once I finish speaking as well. I just wanted to mention that I never meet with the NDIA or the NDIS on my own. Even with my local mental health organisation now, I always take my support worker. I always leave time to debrief after those meetings, because even if the meeting goes well, I'll have feelings that come up during that process, and then I have someone there to discuss those feelings with. And when I do have any interaction with the NDIA, like Nina was saying, I take thorough notes. I get the name of the person, the time of the call, all of the information that I've gotten from them, so that later on, if I need to refer back to that and say, actually, I spoke with Rebecca at 11 a.m. on Tuesday the 5th, and Rebecca said this, I'm really well prepared and set up to advocate for myself, because I have all of my backup information. I do this because sometimes I have gotten conflicting information from different organizations and different people, and I like to have my own record of what's going on. So the resources and supports that I use, like while I'm advocating for myself within the NDIS, the most important resource for me are the people around me, and the people in my personal life who support me to navigate what can be a frustrating and stressful process. So, that's my partner, it's my psychologist, it's my friends, it's my dog Peanut, it's who you can see in the picture there, it's my GP. I also connect to other people who are on the NDIS for psychosocial disability and ask them, where have they found support? What's going well for them? And using myself as a resource, like all of the tools and skills that I've learned over my life in self-advocacy, but also learning about my disability and how I exist in the world and what I need in the world. Reminding myself, that I'm a resource in this process as well, but myself as a resource needs to be backed up by all of these other places, whether that's the Mental Health Coordinating Council, or all these different places that are available to us. And so thanks so much. I will go in and I'll check out some of the questions. I did also just want to say that since having the NDIS, it has significantly improved my life. The support that I have access to now, and the goals that I'm working towards in my life now, I have been able to do. I'm so much more independent. I feel so much more fulfilled because I've been able to follow some lifelong dreams. Like I do comedy, and being able to participate in festivals and have a support worker engaged who is a creative producer and helps me do those things. Like the NDIS has completely changed my life, and I'm really, really grateful for it. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'll go and have a look at some of the questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annalise. Really wonderful to have your perspective on this one again, and some interesting and complex examples that you bring up there of some of the ways that you've self-advocated with having your NDIS plan. Nina, are you there still? Welcome back. I'll hand back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Liz, and thanks, Annalise. I've got a couple of little notes here to note back to what you were saying. Made some really great points there and wonderful information and tips. So yeah, welcome back. And so I'll just cover this session sort of more about your rights, and once you know your rights, then how to advocate, and that all comes back to the self-advocacy tips that I mentioned earlier in this the previous session. So we've got the 6 disability standards, and that's what every service provider and support anybody providing a service to a person with a disability needs to follow these standards. So I covered them in the earlier one, but I'm just going to leave the slide on there just because they're really, really important, and this is your rights. And without knowing all this or referring to it when you're working with a service or a support worker, then you're sort of like in a position where if they don't know, you know, and they're not telling you about it, because they're actually supposed to give you all this information when you engage with the service. And it's surprising how so many people do not know what these standards are. So I'm not going to read them all out again because I read them out in the early one, and we can provide this slide, this information to you later. But what I wanted to cover first off was the plan itself. Now you've got an NDIS plan. I often hear people say that they give their plan to service providers or support workers or anybody that asks. That plan is yours. It's purely, strictly confidential. You do not have to even give it to a service provider when they ask for it. They say, oh, no, but I need to have a look, and da, da, da. They don't actually need to look at anything. If you know what your plan has got in it, and like Annalise said, it's in it's in chunks, like different categories. If you're going to a service provider for, say, daily activities, part of that budget will be for that. Now, you've got a support coordinator. That's what if you've got one, that's their role. That's them saying, okay, well, you want to engage with this service, or you want to have a support worker. They are the person that tells you how much you can use out of those different budgets. So then when you go to a service provider, you already know that information. They never have to have a copy of your plan. But I just hear it time and time again where people are giving away their copies to people, and then, like Annalise pointed out, a really good scenario about the support worker going to the review. And this has happened where support workers look at the plan and they go, wow, this person's got all this funding for a support worker, and it has happened, sadly, that they do milk that and try to get more hours from this person that's very in a vulnerable position. So it's really important. That's your information. So keep it to yourself. And if you are feeling like you're a hassle to give it to somebody, then, you know, reach out and ask for some support. So the next thing is service agreements. And the NDIS actually recommends for people to have service agreements. Now, this can be a bit tricky when you've got independent support workers, because they'll come in, the only requirement they need is an ABN. And depending on the way your plan is working, so if you're self-managed or plan managed, you can use any provider or any service that's got an ABN, as long as it fits within your budget and your goals and the categories. So well, what do you do there? It's always advisable to not put it off to make a service agreement. It can be a really basic, that the person's name, how many hours they're going to work for you, what they're going to do, what their role is, and the agreement between yourselves. If that person cancels a shift, what happens then? What are your obligations to pay them? And vice versa, if you cancel, what are your obligations to them as far as payment goes? And so that's all under the award wage. So a support worker, for example, would work under the SACS or SHADS award. So, you know, if they're a casual, so that's more information you need to know. So you actually do have rights and responsibilities to the worker and they do to you. So they're things that you can negotiate on. Sometimes within the award it says they only have to give you an hour's notice. Well, that's not ideal if you're getting support, and in an hour you're not going to find anybody else. And on that topic, Annalise covered a really, really good point about not just having one person. I did have a scenario where one of the consumers found it really difficult to find a support worker, and they found one that they thought worked for them. The support coordinator and myself are encouraging them to have an extra person, because one support worker isn't going to be available, you know, all throughout the year. And if they've got family and commitments in their personal life, sometimes impacts on their ability to provide those supports when they're scheduled. My suggestion to a lot of people is to find a team. So like it can be 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, and then if they all work well together, then when there's a cancellation or something, that team works together to contact each other. So then it takes the hassle out of for yourself, that you have to find that person on the day if something happens and they're sick. That's something you can discuss with the support workers if they're prepared to work together with you as part of your support team. But yeah, no, it's really important to have more than to rely on one support worker. So those independent support workers, if the other thing too is it's, you know, to ensure that they have, you know, some type of insurance, and because that can also be written into the service agreement. Now, service agreements aren't set in stone. You can make adjustments to them, and that's even with service agreements with providers. Just because you sign something doesn't mean you can't change it or alter it. So if you find a service provider's got this standard way of writing it, you can make changes in that. You can say, no, I'm not happy with that part. Can we change that, or can we take that out? Can we amend it? But when you're doing a service agreement, make sure you've got someone with you, or you get at least a chance to have a look at it, and don't sign it until you understand what you're signing. But most service agreements are flexible. They're not like a contract where you can't get out of them. They usually do have in there that, you know, with notice you can, you know, cancel the agreement. So don't sort of start to get really sort of hung up on that. Oh, that's it, I've signed the form and I'm committed. And like Annalise mentioned, she changed, you know, she had different support coordinators. You always have the choice. If you think something's not working, could be a personality clash with the person that you're working with or the service provider, you can definitely always shop around and change service providers. So make sure you receive a copy of a service agreement, and that'll help you stay on track to ensure the service providing what has been set out in the agreement and what your responsibilities are as participant and their responsibilities. The NDIS website does have a section on service agreements, and it explains, you know, what a service agreement is. As far as templates go, you can find templates on the internet, or like I said, you can just write one up yourself. It just means 2 parties signed to something. So the next thing I wanted to cover was the complaints and feedback policies and procedures. So even if you've got a support person, independent support person, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because how do you then make a complaint against that person? Well, that's where you then look at other avenues, Safeguards Commission, the Frauds Department, the NDIS, and Fair Trading. So those three organisations you can go to if you've got an independent support worker, because unfortunately there's nobody above them that you can go and talk to about. You can always refer to an advocacy association, or get some information from an advocacy service of what to do. So it's really important to know those avenues. So when it comes to the Safeguards Commission, well, the Safeguards Commission was set up where all people working with an NDIS participant have to comply to the Code of Conduct. So this even includes support workers. They have an obligation to follow the Code of Conduct. So all NDIS participants have a right to be free of abuse, neglect, and like Annalise was talking about, support worker, taken advantage of, because that's a serious thing to be taken advantage of. And so the NDIS Safeguards Commission, you can make a complaint online or in person, then you will be allocated, sorry, my internet's clicking off on the computer, so I'm going to have to reconnect on that. So you've probably lost visuals of me. I'll just take a moment to reconnect, or I'll just keep going with this. I'll start the video. Okay, I'll just keep talking and try to reconnect so you get visuals back. So yeah, so with the Safeguards Commission, you are assigned a case manager. The more information you have to give them, the better, about what the complaint is, and then they will follow it up and get back to you. And they also contact the person that the complaint's about to get their version of what's happened. And then how is it going to be resolved? Well, it depends on whether the provider is registered as is private, or they're a registered NDIS provider. So the outcome can be different in those circumstances. The next thing is fraud. So we're finding more and more that people are just taking advantage of people with their funding, and that is considered fraud. So if you have a service that's saying, oh, you've got all this in your plan, how about we do X, Y, and Z, and then they consume a lot of your funding for the purpose of the services they're providing, and then you think, hey, hang on, this wasn't really what was reflecting my goals, and how come now all my funding's taken up by this one service, and they've booked it in? Because what they can do is they can sort of book it in for the whole year, give you a service agreement, and then when you look at it, you go, hey, that's not what I asked for. So that, that can be reported, because the funding is your funding, and nobody should be taking advantage of that. And also with the Frauds Department, you can report things like if somebody's getting into your portal saying, oh, hey, I'll go into your portal, I'll upload my invoices, I'll pay myself. They're not supposed to be doing that. So you will know pretty quickly when you get a feeling that something's not right. And if you aren't sure, just ring up the NDIA or the NDIS Safeguards Commission and ask them the questions, and they'll quickly tell you whether it is fraud or there's been some type of abuse through using your plan with providers. The other thing is a lot of people don't realise that, goods and services is fair trading, right? So when you've got an NDIS plan, that's what you're doing. You're getting goods and services. So if you have any complaints, where you've purchased things, or even the services, you can make complaints through fair trading. So you have 3 avenues then: the Safeguards Commission, Frauds Department, and fair trading. This information also, if you would like it, you can request it through Liz and we can send it to you, because there's a lot of information for me to go through that now, but it'd be really valuable for you to have it. So we talked about consumer rights, and now I'm going to go on to the roles that come up with the NDIS plan. One of them is the LACs. That's short for Local Area Coordinator. So usually you'll find a LAC is a person that you go and sit down face to face or have a meeting with when you're coming up for review. Usually when you go for your first plan, it'll be a local area coordinator and maybe a planner together. Now, this is something that I only learned and during these sessions, is that when you are asked a series of questions, it's not a stock standard series of questions for everybody. The way you answer a question usually generates the next question. So like Annalise said, it's a great tip. Go for your worst case scenario day, because when they ask you a question and you're sort of not really sure and you can go, you know, this way or that way, you're probably best off going worst case scenario day, because let's face it, you might have 50% of them, 20%, but if you don't get that right support, right funding for those worst case scenario days, then you'll be left short in your plan to provide that. So with a local area coordinator, so they can help you understand and access the plan. So some people don't get support coordination. So a local area coordinator's role is, once you've got the plan, whether it's a new plan, a review plan, or an annual plan, a scheduled review plan, you can contact that local area coordinator for some information and about your plan and how to implement the plan. They do have an obligation to do that. With the first plan, it was a standard that they could give you 10 hours of support coordination. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't know that, or the LACs failed to deliver that or inform people of that, but that's certainly part of their role. So they help you create the plan, which is at the review, implement your plan, what I've just spoken about. So to find and start receiving services in your NDIS plan, and provide assistance throughout your plan if you have any questions. These are the things people aren't really aware of, that LAC's role doesn't just stop at the review. And they can also review your plan. So when it comes to reviewing your plan, you can contact the LAC. They can initiate the review. Now, I've got one client that had up to 5 unscheduled reviews in the second year of the plan. So if circumstances change and your goals change, you can always request an unscheduled review. Yet, as Annalise said, you really have to back it up with some documentation and evidence as to why you need what you're asking for in that review. So the plan support coordination. So how do you get support coordination and what is it? Well, the support coordination is a bit of a tricky one, because if you turn up to a review and they ask you a series of questions and you don't even know that you can get a support coordinator, or you ask for one, then they'll ask you a certain series of questions to see if you're eligible. Now, in my experience, some people they get it and other people don't. And unfortunately, the ones that don't are probably some of the people that would really be beneficial they had it. So if you don't get a support coordination in your plan, you can put a review in to ask for it. It's really difficult to navigate a first plan, and a lot of people have got to the end of the plan and haven't actually used all their funding because they didn't really understand how to implement it, navigate it, and get services. So, and they didn't know they could go back to a LAC for that. So support coordination, when it comes to psychosocial disability, a lot of times the LAC might ask for evidence of, you know, how the psychosocial disability impacts on your ability to implement your plan. And sometimes well, that's usually that evidence will be there from when you applied for NDIS, and you might have to just give that to them again. But it's up to you to decide whether you want the support coordination, and then it will be determined on how many hours you receive a year. So the role of the support coordinator is to connect you to services, to build on your ability to connect with informal, community and funded supports, enabling you to get the most out of your plan and achieve your goals. So the support will assist you to build the skills you need to understand, implement and use your plan. So sometimes people get support coordination a lot of hours in the first plan, less in the second, and sometimes they get to a stage where they don't require the support coordination, because if you've got a really good support coordinator, you may find that you can start to navigate the plan, and once the services are in place and it's all set up, then you might not need that support coordination. But my tip is to try to keep it, because things do change, scenarios change. So it's always good to have a backup plan, somebody to help you do that. They'll work with you to ensure a mix of supports are used to increase your capacity to maintain relationships, manage service delivery tasks, and live more independently and be included in your community. And those cover your goals in the plan. So there is a higher level of support coordination, which is called specialist support coordination. This isn't included in your plan unless it's requested and approved. It's for people whose situations are more complex and need specialist support. They will assist to manage challenges in your support environment and ensuring consistent delivery of services. So that's the role of a support coordinator. And then we get to plan management. So you have choice with what you do with managing the plan. You can be self-managed, which means you pay all your own invoices and services, or you can be plan managed, and you engage in a plan manager through an organisation, and there's a set amount of funding for that person, and they will, all services that you receive, all invoices go to that person, and they will pay for you. And a really good plan manager will give you a summary once a month of what your plan's looking like, and what you've already spent, and who and what you've used it for. So if they don't give you one of those, it's not a big deal for them to get it for you. Usually they can access that information through what they've been doing. So it's really good to ask for that monthly, so you can keep a track on where you're up to with everything. With plan management and self-managed, you can use any provider or service that's got an ABN that reflects your goals and is in the categories that you've got in your plan. And then I wanted to talk about plan nominee. So when you have a plan, you can nominate somebody to be your plan nominee. So this person will be able to liaise with NDIS, ask questions, liaise with your service providers and support persons, but only with your consent. So, but you can put them as a plan nominee, include them on your NDIS plan by contacting NDIS. And the other thing is an authorised contact person. So I can't be a nominee for anybody, but I can be an authorised contact person. Same thing, can do this over the phone, but as long as you're with that person at the time and requesting it, and then they can include that person as an authorised contact person. This is actually a really good thing to have, because sometimes, you know, there's a situation where you just need to find out something, and you might not have the energy to do that, or it's just another task. Whereas if this authorised contact person can do that on your behalf, that's great. They ring up, they ask the questions, and they come back with what you need. And also, when you're finding it difficult to navigate through the system with that person, straight away the NDIS has got them on next to your plan, and so then you don't have to go through the whole consent thing again when you're talking to them with that person. And there was one other thing. Oh, just a final thing is, look, you know, if you find yourself being overwhelmed by NDIS, primarily with the first plan, even a second plan, or navigating through the NDIS, it's quite common. And for some people, the NDIS, it's all about the supports that you're getting through the funding and the supports you have in your life. Because like Annalise mentioned, you know, you've got to look after yourself, and it's really, really important to do that, because it is almost like a full-time job, especially when it's all new and you're not sure how it's all looking. And maybe you're having difficulty trying to find those services that really fit. You've got to get a really good fit, and never, ever hesitate to say, this isn't a good fit. I need to find something that works better for me. And then, you know, once all that sort of falls into place, then it won't feel as overwhelming. So just stick with it, and ask for that support whenever you need it, and take a support person or a family member or informal support with you at any time that you feel you need that. And that's it for me. Thanks for
Wonderful.
listening.
Thank you so much, Nina. So much you've covered there. Thank you for all your work bringing it all together. Karen, are you there? Welcome.
Hi. Yes, I am here. Thank you.
I'll let you introduce yourself. Sorry. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay, yes, so you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Nina and Liz, as well, for inviting me to join the webinar today again. I'm joining you all from the traditional lands of the Darug and Ku-ring-gai people. It was so excellent to hear from Annalise. Thanks, Annalise, for that. So my name's Karen Tippett, and I manage the advocacy and leadership development work at Family Advocacy. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our work, particularly for those who weren't on the last webinar. Thanks, Liz. So we're New South Wales-wide independent advocacy organisation. So we work with families to undertake the advocacy on behalf of their family member with developmental disability. So they have the same opportunities as other Australians. We're founded now, it's 30 years this year, and we're governed by parents of someone with a disability. Both we're whole of life, so we've got you know, from preschool age, from babies right through to adults, and we're supporting the family to support that person and make sure that they're getting offered the same you know, opportunities as other Australians are offered. So we provide advocacy support and advice to families so that they can be effective in their advocacy efforts. And support families through developing, you know, their awareness and their knowledge and skills so that they can take up leadership opportunities and influence change as well. And importantly, we have systemic advocacy in our work so that change can actually happen for all people with disability. And this involves working with government and community groups and politicians, etc., to progress necessary change. Obviously, there's something big like the NDIS was a large, we did a lot of large preparation before this came in to try and make sure that it was going to be done in a really positive and person-centered way. So that systemic work really is it works alongside the leadership development work. Families talk to us, we understand what's going on the ground for people with disabilities, and we are able to feed that in an unidentified way through for a systemic change as well. And currently, of course, the really important that's going on at the moment is the Disability Royal Commission, and we're supporting people with putting in submissions and engaging with the Commission. I encourage all of you today to consider any experiences that you could share, or you could encourage others to share to the Commission, because this is the largest or the most effective or powerful way of affecting change in Australia. Next. So why the family? So I'm just going to briefly explain the role of the family here, which is obviously our audience. So families actually have an absolute understood and legitimate natural role in our society. And of course, they hold a lot of history and information on the person that they're advocating on behalf or with. And typically families have a most constant relationship in someone's life as well, and in there for the longer term. We find a lot with people advocating, you know, supporting someone outside of the family relationship can often be just there for a period of that person's life, and it's quite siloed in that effect. So a family obviously has that thread of connection to the whole of life in a typical situation. And they're uniquely placed, obviously, to speak passionately and persistently. Advocacy requires a lot of persistence, and so that's another role that the families have. However, in considering that, I also always want to refer the fact that, of course, families, parents, and other family members have their own needs, and for that reason, it's really important to know whether there's any competing or conflicting needs between the person who's doing the advocating and on behalf and with the person with the disability, and the needs of the person with the disability themselves. And our role is in family advocacy is absolutely about the person with disability and how we can help the family and the parents, etc., navigate that so that they're looking after themselves, but our focus is on the person with a disability, and that balance is very, very important. On paying attention to those tension areas is very important. The person needs to be absolutely unashamedly biased towards the person with the disability and the support needs. It's important also to keep in mind that families need to always be working on building the capacity of the person, the family member, increasing their independence and ensuring that their voice is heard, particularly as they move into adulthood. It's about supporting the decision making and finding those skills to do that, not to be making the decisions on their behalf. The person's voice and is obviously paramount. Look, particularly with the introduction of the NDIS, we're taking increasing amount of inquiries around guardianship and the need for that. So especially when someone is now an adult. But I stress again the natural authority that I referred to, that even after the person is an adult, the family still does have that natural authority or natural way of working with and supporting that person's needs. So guardianship only becomes necessary when those relationships have broken down or there's real conflict within a family about that person's needs and what should be happening for them. So, and the guardianship role as well is mostly a temporary effect. So for even up to maybe only 6 months or maybe up to 5 years at the most. So guardianship is not an answer here. It's about working with the services, particularly those mainstream services such as health insurers, banks, etc., working with them so that they understand that need and that they're not just so that the right effect is happening for the person, and it's that the family isn't just being discounted and the person with disability potentially missing out on important information, etc., because they've not potentially got the capacity to receive that information or do that work. So it's just a point because it's becoming an increasing issue, actually, it seems. And just finally, too, on this slide, really important to champion the social model and not the medical model of disability. So the model refers to the need for change and adjustments around the person's environment, removing those barriers rather than fixing any particular disability or making them fit into the environment that is there. So that social model is something that we refer to families to actually really pay attention on and make sure that that's where the efforts are being put, and so that strengthens the skills of the person and the individual is being championed there, not discounted. So the next slide, I'm going to refer to tips that now there is an NDIS plan in place. Some of the key tips from from family advocacy's perspective. So what sort of life? So it's working towards a long-term vision, a good life for the person, about relationships, about independence, active involvement in decision-making, community engagement, contribution, using their unique skills and their strengths and building on those. So firstly, let's keep these foundational needs that we all have as humans at the centre of all our thinking. And we want this funding scheme to build better lives. So we want to push it to work hard for us. So that broad thinking about the sort of life you want should be the cornerstone, I guess, of all the thinking that goes on in the detail. So this is around having that vision of the good life in mind, means that the goals then that the plan has in place refer to that vision, and then the outcomes that come from the goals are going back into the goals. So your vision refers to your goals, and then your outcomes are creating or managing or building on those goals. And that we refer to as the golden thread. If the NDIA can see the building here, the change, the outcomes of reaching those goals, that's what they want to see happening. Okay, so it's not about, it's always coming back to, is the support that's happening, is the work that's going on moving this person forward? Is it going and directly working towards that person's goals and that person's more meaningful life? So you could consider a meaningful week in this regard, where are there informal supports, where are there gaps for the person, and what's relevant to expect from family and parents as well in terms of the support, what's relevant for them, and also what's not relevant. Where is the support over and above the family's expectations in our society, I guess, and making sure that as they move into adulthood, that is reducing and that person is able to improve and increase their independence as much as possible. In terms of managing the plan, and I'll try not to just reiterate what Nina has spoken about, but there is, the plan is designed to be as flexible as possible and work for the person. Okay, so there's 3 ways to manage it: the agency managed, plan managed, and self-managed, with an option of actually having flexibility and managing things in 3 different ways across the same plan. So you might decide that one goal and the management of that will be on the agency to do, and you might want to actually do self-managing in other areas of the plan so that you have an increased amount of control around what's going on there. And obviously it's far more flexibility and choice in both plan managed and in self-management. So a key benefit of plan and self-managing is actually being able to use non-registered, non-NDIS registered providers so that you can actually be tapping into your community. And I was saying earlier that to one of the panelists that often in the regional areas where there is a potential lack of particular service providers, I actually find that a lot of families who are self-managing are able to then just tap into that community, find people that are going to work well with their family member, and they can be brought into the team supporting that person, and then you're not relying on service providers and service provision in your area. So it's an important part, distinguishment between agency and plan and self, is that you can use non-registered providers. By self-managing, you're also not using a middleman, and therefore you have increased transparency and control over how the funds are being used. Nina mentioned about getting a list of how that funds is coming about, and that if you're self-managing, you've got that control yourself. If you're plan managing, you do need to make that arrangement to make sure you are aware of it so that you're not surprised. Now, I know I haven't got really much time left, so I'm just going to quickly go through the other areas. There are 2 types of review. I'm not sure we've quite covered that. The scheduled review that comes up maybe each year or maybe even 2 yearly, or an internal review when you want to challenge a decision, which has to be done within 3 months of getting the plan. So certainly advocacy organisations can work with you on putting those reviews in. The reasonable and necessary is the benchmark that delegates use to decide whether to fund something or not, and you really need to show the support of that in your plan. Will the support help to reach the goals? Is it good value? Will it bring about true economic and social participation? Is it current good practice? All the things that will determine, the delegate will determine as to whether that's going to be provided in your plan. If things change, and I think Nina did say that, you can activate a change in circumstance. Building relationships. I think we said if you are taking calls from people, make sure you know who that person is, what their role is, how to contact them. Very important to do so. And also in terms of relationship building is also just considering that anecdotal, holistic view of a person. It's not just about the medical side of it or the diagnosis side, it's about the person themselves. So I will add some links, Liz, to the follow-up so that I can refer to a couple of the other points I was going to raise here. And you can just, last point, you own the plan, not the NDIA, and that's really important. Don't give away your authority. So if you flick through the last couple of slides briefly, I won't talk to them, Liz. I'll just, yeah. Lots of other supports there to go to, and we'll add some more in the follow-up email as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm sorry that we don't have much time today because the information you're adding there is so invaluable. So yeah, sorry that you didn't get more time there. I think most people online, with the interest of time, you're probably already familiar with Reimagine Today, or if you're not, then please feel free to check it out. We have a lot of resources on there that focus also on things like self-advocacy and other skills that were identified by and for people living with mental health conditions as important skills around the NDIS. So self-advocacy, decision-making, self-management. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is that if you want me to print and send you any of these resources, then just email me. My email is elizabeth@mhcc.org.au, and I'm happy to print and post you out anything NDIS related. We've also got a lot of interactive resources on there, like videos that you can watch, which is all people sharing from their lived experience. Also some e-learning activities, again, around skill building, like in things like self-advocacy. And we also have an app version of our workbook, which has been really well received over the last few years. So it's a good way, a companion to sort of support you through the access and initial planning journey with the NDIS. So moving on, next I'd like to welcome Jonathan Harms, who's the CEO with the Mental Health Carers New South Wales. He's going to briefly share with us some of the exciting work that they've been doing. Thanks very much for joining us, Jonathan.
Well, thanks very much, Elizabeth, and to all the other panelists. It's been really fascinating, and I've been learning a lot as well. I just thought that I'd come on and talk briefly about the project that Mental Health Carers New South Wales is working on to help create a mental health carer advocacy network to help mental health carers in particular undertake self-advocacy in systemic roles around the state and with the statewide committees that we work on with New South Wales Health in particular. The lived experience framework that the Mental Health Commission is rolling out across New South Wales calls upon the local health districts and the health services they operate to engage people with lived experience and their families and carers in co-design and in governance roles indeed, to make sure that the services that are being delivered and the way in which they are being designed, co-designed hopefully, and co-delivered eventually, is going to work for the people who need to use those services. And so in order to promote the capacity of mental health carers to be able to participate in those kinds of activities, we've been reimagining our organisation and setting up this lived experience network. We're keen to hear from mental health carers who support people, whether they're getting the NDIS or any other form of support from funded services around New South Wales, and to sign them up to get them informed as to what opportunities are going on in their area or at the statewide level for carer participation, as well as providing them with training and support and resources to actually participate in those opportunities and to make their needs and their loved ones' needs better known. So carers do need specific support, particularly in mental health care, in order to be able to keep turning up and keep supporting their loved one and keep advocating on their behalf. Their own well-being needs to be taken care of, but they are also often powerful advocates on behalf of their family members, albeit with those very important considerations that Karen alluded to about making sure that they themselves have an understanding of the social nature of disability support and the way that that model should be implemented, and are always working to build their loved ones' capacity for responsible autonomy, and not to obstruct that blossoming autonomy in any way in their caring role. So we've got some information and links that I think we can have sent around by Elizabeth after the meeting for people who are interested in joining us. It is bigger than the NDIS, but we will be looking, for example, at an issue that's come up. In fact, I'm finalising a submission today about independent functional assessments, which is a new way that they're going to be assessing people to participate in the NDIS and understand the nature of their limitations. That's something that we have grave concerns about, and many mental health carers do as well. We feel that it would inappropriately reduce the scope for advocacy and evidence to be used in determining these supports, and also perhaps inadvertently push forward a more biomedical model of disability and disability support, which is not really appropriate for anyone, but especially inappropriate for psychosocial disability. And I don't know whether any other panelists would like to reflect on that, but certainly something that we're keen to support carers to advocate and to advocate with carers against, because we do have some concerns about how that could be realised in the scheme as it stands. So I don't know if there are any questions or if anyone has anything they'd like me to add on any subject.
Well, none have come through yet, but we can answer them as they do. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us and for agreeing also to stay with us for the Q&A panel, which I'll open back into now if everybody wants to come back, our panelists, please. Yeah, so if anybody has questions for any of our panelists, then feel free to put them in through the Q&A box. I think we're running out of time, so I'll jump into some of our questions, and I might end up skipping a couple as well. But to start off, okay, how do you get a plan for someone who does not want the support, but their family know they need help, as it is so much on the family? It's a big question.
Annalise, were you starting that one, or did you? Well, it was me.
I think you were going to.
I think it's you, Karen.
Sorry.
And then I'll go.
Yes, sorry. Okay. But so basically, it's ultimately about the person getting the plan. So the family, if they feel there's a need for support, it could be about talking with that person and seeing where they see that the supports can be provided outside of the family and where it's provided by the family. Maybe that's just a miscommunication, really, in terms of what that person feels might happen if they suddenly got NDIS and they would lose their family. Maybe there's that sort of issue in their mind. So really opening that conversation and understanding where the family's role is, because what we actually want from the NDIS is the family's role to be family, be informal, be loving support, not be a service provider or a support worker for their person. So maybe that conversation opens up, the person will understand that more. Yeah, so that's certainly one way of looking at that, and exploring other options outside of the NDIS as well, seeing where else there might be support that's not about NDIS funding.
Yeah, and I would echo what Karen has just said, and also maybe try to talk to the person with a disability about, you know, what they want for their life and what goals they have and what they see for their future, because maybe they're not seeing the benefits of how the NDIS might be able to help them. But again, ultimately, it's about the person and their right, the person with a disability and their right to choose whether or not they want the NDIS.
Wonderful. And Jonathan, I think this is one of the points I thought I could ask for your opinion, is because we reflected that maybe the family just needs more support. So what they might be able to do.
Well, look, it can be a very complex issue, because sometimes a person who's experiencing a psychosocial disability might not have a good understanding of the family's needs, and certainly the NDIS isn't a particularly fruitful area to get support for people other than the person who's the recipient. There is some respite and family and support services available through the NDIS, but it's actually much more limited than dedicated respite services used to be, in my understanding, Karen. And I would agree that there is limited scope to make an application on behalf of someone who maybe is not willing to get that support, and you know that can put people in a difficult situation. And I think it is one that it's important to work through carefully with all stakeholders, as empathically and supportively as possible, while still retaining the understanding that you know, the carers might have needs that might not be evident or as pressing in the opinion of the person who might participate in the scheme. So yeah, I think everybody has to work together very carefully in those circumstances.
Okay. Well, thanks to everybody. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a complex and sensitive sort of issue. Next question. How do you determine what services you need and want, and can you get them?
So I would think about your goals. So what is it that you want to achieve, and now think about like what you would need to achieve that goal. But it's also not just about what you need, but what would be helpful for you to live the life that you want. So it's not just about survival, it's about thriving. Like what would make you happy, what would make you connected, what would bring you joy, what would bring you meaning and purpose. So think about all of those things, and then you might be able to get an idea of like what you would need, like where you're at now and where you want to be, and what you need to get from where you're at now to where you want to be.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll move on to the next question, just in the interest of time. So how do I go about transitioning to self-management from plan management? Can I get help? And what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of self-management?
Okay, so I'll start off if you like. So the transitioning one should be a very simple admin change to your plan. If you're not wanting anything else changed, it's just about the management of the plan. They call it a light touch review. This is a fairly internal term, but I do encourage you to use it to say this is what I want done, and that should be like a week that you just change a week's time frame. That should be able to be changed, and you'll get a plan back saying that you're managing either all of the plan or part of the plan in another way. So that's the first thing. Yes, plan and self-managing is absolutely going to increase your empowerment to make decisions and to be in control of what's happening. Reviewing, you can request that there's extra support to develop your skills if you are self-managing. So skills such as bookkeeping or buying of software, or as Nina had talked about, the support coordination are all things that could be added into the plan, because you need to build your capacity to be able to self-manage. So that's an important part of the process. And some of the advantages and disadvantages, I spelled out a couple, but I'll reiterate one of the key differences for plan and self-managing is that you don't have to use a registered NDIS provider. One of the key things for self-managers is that you don't have to use the price guide. The price guide is not your only point of reference. You can actually purchase supports below or above the price guide. And this provides a lot of flexibility. If you can negotiate your supports to be really unique to you, it means you might not use a whole hour or 2 hour block for a person if you're using a support person. And you might negotiate the costs depending on, that person and what you're doing and what you're expecting from them, which means that you might have some built-in opportunity for extra money to use in another way, or extra time to use in another way. So you really get a whole new level of flexibility when you are self-managing because of that. So there's other things, but I thought I'd just touch on the really key ones that would make the most difference.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Next question is, if NDIS consumers invest time, effort and planning, what are the emotional payoffs, rewards or returns?
I'm happy to take this. For me, there's been plenty of payoffs. It's really improved my relationships with myself and with others, like my family members, my partner, my friends. I'm not relying on them so much to be in a carer role. I'm able to be more independent. I'm feeling more fulfilled. There's the validation of having my disability recognised as it's an invisible disability. I'm feeling more connected with my community. I have a sense of purpose and motivation to reach the goals that I set for myself. I've basically got an improved quality of life in every single way. I have more support, more stability, and there's less pressure on me financially, because all of these things I needed before and really struggled to pay for, and now I'm getting the financial support to pay for them. So it has completely changed my life for the better in every way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annalise. And as usual, I find that's really inspiring. And so I hope so for the people joining us as well. We are out of time today. So would each of you like to share some final advice for the people out there listening?
Just start, since Nina's still on mute there.
Not joined us again, unfortunately.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
I'm
here you
here.
go.
Oh, there, Nina. Hi.
I've been
Just
listening.
connection issues in Bega, yeah?
No. Yeah, no, I just think that these sessions are invaluable, and just keep reaching out to people when you need support.
Okay, and I'll add to that is the vision. Use the vision of the good life. What is it? What do you see your life being like, your person's life being like, and use that as your keystone for everything that you do and think about. The NDIS is not going to create a good life for you. It's a funding mechanism. So use it to create the good life that you know you want and deserve and have the right to.
Yeah. And I would say, sorry, Jonathan, I would say don't lose hope, be persistent. Also, just because the NDIA might say no to something, it doesn't mean you don't deserve it, and it doesn't have to be the end of the road. Keep trying.
It's
And
great.
people being able to take over running their own packages and selecting and identifying their own goals and needs. That's the content of recovery for psychosocial disability. So all carers should be 100% behind that.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I wish we had more time for Q&A because it's so wonderful to hear your perspectives on some of these questions. Thanks again to Nina in particular for all the work that you've done preparing all that content, and to our guests, Jonathan, Karen and Annalise, and as well especially to all of you for taking the time to join us today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. This is our general email, but my email is Elizabeth, ELIS for Sam, @mhcc.org.au. And just finally, as this webinar contains some content that may have been distressing for you or stressful, we recommend that you talk to somebody about it afterwards. Just debrief, talk about what you thought about it or how it made you feel, and either reach out to somebody you trust, or you can call one of the helplines out there, so such as Beyond Blue, which is 1300 224 636 for brief counselling and referrals, or if it's an emergency, call 000. Take care and stay safe. Bye for now.